get started, how would we go about writing this? Always going to suggest you start off with all the boilerplate taken care of. With a new py, it's going to be called mad.py, and then we can open that, and we can change our argparse bits here. It's going to be called madlibs. It's going to accept a file. That is going to be one of the things that it accepts. And the other is a list of inputs. So I'm going to get rid of this positional argument. I'm going to make this is going to actually be -I for inputs. I can't remember if it's input or inputs. It's going to be inputs for testing. That's going to be one or more string values. So I'm going to make this into in args is equal to actually zero or more. They're allowed to be none, but but it can be more than one if they are provided. We don't need this integer. We do need a file, and I believe, let's see. Oh no, that is going to be a positional argument. So it actually doesn't matter how you define these in relation to each other, so I can define the option first and the positional next. I'm going to make that into a readable text field file. This will be the input file, and there will be no default. It's going to be required. It's a positional argument, so it'll be required like that. And then we don't need the Boolean flag. Let's see how we're doing on the usage here. I always like to maybe just start off by print args.file.name. Now, reason why I can say args.file.name is because I have determined that this is a file type. So what I will be getting is that if that is a readable text file that I'm giving it on the command line, then I will be provided as an open file handle. So if I run mad, and I'm going to give it the inputs, this fox that's here, it's going to show me inputs fox. To note, if I were to just put in some garbage here, it's going to reject that with no such file or directory because that doesn't exist. So let me get rid of that. So that's some of the error checking that we get from declaring this as a file type readable text. If I were to give it, say, some file that, let me just show you, for instance, I'm going to use the touch command to touch a file called foo, and I'm going to chmod that to 000. And if we were to look at the long listing for that, we see it's not a readable file. It is a file. It's a zero-length file, but it's not readable. So if I were to, for instance, try to run that, it would give me that it can't open the file, that there's a permission denied, and you see that it's showing me the usage here. So there's quite a bit of error checking that's going on just because of the way I've described the argument. So really, really useful to describe your inputs like that. Okay, so we have a positional argument and we have one or more inputs. So I can print the file name. That's a file handle. I can also get the text by calling read on this. Now, we've talked a little bit about reading a file. Let me just print the text here and make sure this works. So that is required. Let me go back and run it with the inputs fox. And it is printing having read the file. The file ends in a new line, so we could actually get rid of that. We could rstrip that. And what I was going to say is that I've talked a little bit about the dangers of reading in an entire file, because if you don't have at least that much memory on your machine, then your machine could crash. In this case, because of the nature of the parsing that we're going to be doing on this, we really pretty much have to have the whole file in memory. It's unlikely that, in this particular instance that there could be a new line inserted inside one of these brackets, but in the real world of parsing things like this, if it were HTML, there very well could be a line break in the middle of a tag like that. There could be spaces and it could be formatted in many different ways. So you really need to have the whole file in memory. This goes for parsing XML, HTML, JSON, YAML. All these file formats really require the whole file to be in memory at once. And so that's something that we're playing around with, is parsing a file. And we'll see how difficult this can actually be. So now, just because of the way we've described our inputs, having a file type there and it's readable, we're able to just immediately read in our data. And so this should handle it. Let's just go check our help, make sure that we're looking pretty good there. That looks really reasonable. Let's run make test just to see how we're going so far. We do get past 3. The program exists. It does print a usage. It does error out on a bad file. All that's great. The first thing that we're given is a file that has no blanks. So for instance, it's running with the file called no blanks. If we look at inputs and we cat the inputs no blanks, what we see is this text has no placeholder. So one of the first things that we need to detect is that we're unable to find any of those angle bracket placeholders. And the reason why I want you to be able to do that is because I'm trying to get you to think about error handling after we've left the get args. So we've talked a lot about using parser error when we note that we're just given incorrect data, and we can pretty much detect it right there at the point of parsing the arguments. We're going to be getting further into the program here. Really, I think of this processing part is more of just belonging into the main. And so we're out of get args. We read the text from the user, and then we determine that there are no placeholders. So how would we handle that here in the main part of the body and not in get args? So that's something we're going to have to figure out how to handle this. Always good to just back up and make sure you understand from a high level what we're doing. We have this program called mad.py. It's going to take some file and maybe some inputs, and it's going to output some new text. It's going to find all of these placeholders in the text, and it's going to replace those either with the inputs from the command line, or it's going to prompt the user repeatedly for each one of the inputs, and then once it has them all, it's going to create the text for the outputs. So the next thing we're going to talk about is how to use a regular expression to find those pieces of text inside the angle brackets.